My name is Lance Charles. This is my wife, Sarah McDonald. She's the mother of Brianna McDonald. Brianna passed away on August 23rd from an overdose. She struggled with mental health, and it dragged her down pretty to a dark path. She was an amazing little girl. She had a laugh like no other child. She was there for you when you needed her. And around the time when I came into Brianna's life, Brianna started to experience issues with her mental health. She started experimenting with drugs as well. Her drug of choice was Molly, but would try anything she could get her hands on. Brianna had over 20 recorded suicide attempts. She tried to overdose on prescription drugs that she would steal. Over time, you could see she was going down a very dark path. We as parents started to discuss what we could do and try and get her help. We looked into treatment centers, mental health centers, doctors and counselors. None of it helped. The treatment centers would tell us that she was too young. The doctors would tell us she had behavioral issues. Others would tell us she's too young to diagnose. Brianna's father and I would beg doctors to keep her in hospitals. The doctors would overlook what we said and release her, sending us home with Narcan kits. This was really starting to get alarming. We spent every other week with Brianna at the hospital, it seemed like. She was prescribed many different medications and prescriptions. Some worked for a bit, others didn't work at all. We noticed things were getting darker. She became a ball of rage. She was up all night, sneaking around and doing her drugs. She started to come and go as she pleased. Sarah and I would often get woken up by the police, bringing her home because she was found extremely intoxicated. Police would also be needed when she would have her violent episodes and threaten to kill herself. An officer actually asked me once, what would I like him to do? I told the officer, she's threatening to harm herself. Please invoke the Mental Health Act and force her into a hospital. The officer told me he couldn't because that's against her will. This is when I discovered the Infants Act. This little girl had more rights to her medical decisions than her own parents. She could tell doctors anything they wanted to hear, and they would release her. Back in February of this year, Brianna was found in the kitchen overdosing. Sarah called 911, and an ambulance came a short time later to take her to Abbotsford General. Sarah got very mad when she was at the hospital. She stood up to the doctors who were just going to pump Brianna's stomach and send her on home. Sarah directly told the doctors, we are tired of this. And Brianna needed help with her mental health. This time they sent her to Children's Hospital in Vancouver. Brianna didn't do well there. She was lashing out at staff, screaming. They really couldn't handle her. They weren't fit to handle her. So they transferred her to a place called Cap Soo. It's at Surrey Memorial. They held her for about 10 days. While there, she did have her good days and she had her bad. Sarah had a meeting with the doctors. They told her Brianna was clear to be released, when realistically she wasn't. She had just finished putting a pencil through her hand. Well, once again, Sarah fought to keep her there, and of course, all they did was send us home with a Narcan kit. This is when we started to see the real dark side of Brianna. We noticed she started using drugs like Molly on a regular basis. We were astounded that she could actually get these drugs. One evening, a car randomly pulled up in front of our house. I went outside after asking my wife who this person was showing up in front of our house. Turns out we didn't have a clue. We went out to look, or I went out to check and make sure and ask what this person's business was in front of our place. These were two 16-year-old children there to sell our daughter, Molly. So we took pictures of license plates and reported it to the police. The Police never did anything. Didn't even report back to us. Now I was really getting worried. It was shortly after Sarah started wondering what else was she up to. So she started following Brianna around. Brianna would actually go to a harm reduction site, and she would acquire these Ziploc bags full of needles, cooking kits, and pamphlets on how to cook the drugs and safely use them. We were astounded the fact that these were available to a child. How can a 12-year-old at that time acquire these? She can't buy marijuana at a dispensary. She can't buy booze at a liquor store. But she's able to pick up these kits to use drugs from a harm reduction site, a site that is meant for people that are not children. It didn't make any sense. Now we have reached the darkest times just before she passed. Around the end of July 2024, Brianna became so violent towards her mom and I. And this was a direct result of not just the drugs, but her mental health had gone so far down a deep path. Sarah was destroyed seeing her daughter do this. We talked about it every night, trying to figure out what to do. Days later, Brianna became so violent with her mom and I, she got into a fight with her mom and actually caused some serious damage. Her mother ended up in hospital with a severe concussion and some serious brain trauma. I ended up with a black eye and a cracked orbital socket. Now her mental health was really in a dark spot because now we didn't feel safe with having her at our house when we have other children. So the police removed her from our house and advised that it was not safe for her to be around our other children because now she had become so violent. So they ended up taking her to a place called Cyrus House. And Cyrus House tried to hold her and keep her there. She stayed one night. The next night she didn't return. So Cyrus Center, when she didn't return, put out a missing persons report. This is when we found out she now wanted to be at a homeless camp. The police found her there. They didn't directly tell us that she was at a homeless camp. We found that out days later by ourselves. All they said to us was, she is safe, and she's with another adult who's nobody to us. We didn't know her, didn't even know her name. Since when is it okay for a 13-year-old to be at a homeless camp? Why didn't the police bring her back to Cyrus House? Why was she just left there with another adult that doesn't associate with us? We did keep in contact with Brianna every day. We brought her food, we bought her clothes, but she didn't want to return home. We tried to inflict rules, try to give her more stability and tell her that if she comes home, she's got to follow these. And she goes, why? I can do whatever I want out here. It didn't make any sense. You know, if she needed clothes, she needed anything, she could always reach out to us, and we were there for her. Now we come up to August 22nd, 2024, and August 23rd, 2024. I went to work on August 22nd thinking this wasn't going to be a change in my life. I was at work, and I worked night shifts at C-SPAN International. And my wife, who never calls me at 3 in the morning, I received the phone call, the one that a parent dreads. She started the conversation off with, I love you very much. This is when she proceeded to tell me that our daughter had passed. This is every parent's nightmare. This is when we realized the system we have in place has failed her, and massively. The people she could go to for help failed her. My question, and always will be, is why are harm reduction places considered safe? Why our children aren't allowed, or not, I shouldn't say allowed, why is there no programs really in place for our children and their mental health? These drug addictions would have never become what they were if she could honestly get the mental help. She used to tell us she would have demons and voices in her head, and the only way she could drown them out was through the drug use. If I don't know about you guys here, but when you stand back and think about that, that is very alarming. That a child is using drugs to drown out voices in her head. The mental health problems were there, but anybody we reached out to weren't. They would send us home with Narcan kits. They would tell us that we can't force her into anything against her will. On September 19th, Brianna's friend, Shayton, very, very lovely little boy. They were best friends. They started experimenting with drugs because they both struggled with mental health. He had a very hard time dealing with the fact that Brianna was gone, to the point where he made a suicide attempt shortly before Brianna's funeral. And days later, after her funeral, succeeded. He is no longer with us. These are two 13-year-olds, two of them, that have passed. Now, not only because of drugs, but struggling with mental health. We need things to change, because our children are dying, and we can't afford to lose any more children. I thank you for bringing us here to speak, and I hope Brianna's story, and as well as Shayton's story, can bring awareness to the struggles that our children are having, and to bring awareness to the parents that are struggling with children that are struggling. It hurts every day thinking about this situation, because I think if Brianna had access to the proper mental help, she'd still be here today and be able to tell you this herself. Instead, we have to speak on her behalf because she's no longer with us. It breaks my heart having to speak about a child that's no longer here. We do need change, and it needs to be now. Our children are dying, and no other parents should be going through this pain. And I hope today we can bring some answers and enlightenment to this subject. I thank you.